I'm your host, Amber Ivana, and this is Mom's New Identity podcast.
Yo soy la madre, I'm the creator. Yo soy la reina, I am the maker. You can bow down now or bow down later. I don't need you to be my validator. I am the healer, la curandera. I'm starting fires, don't need madera. Deep as an ocean, light as a feather. Bring on the dragons, I am the slayer. Madre, creator, I am madre.
First, let me say I'm glad you're here. On this podcast, my goal is to help fellow mothers redefine motherhood on their terms. How would I do that, you ask? Great question. By having honest, vulnerable, and sometimes even uncomfortable conversations about parenting, motherhood, childhood trauma, and mental health. We do this so we can challenge the ideas of what society tells us we're supposed to be and do as mothers and as women. My hope is that when we as mothers begin to heal and be true to ourselves, we can begin thriving instead of just surviving. Before we jump into this episode, I do just have to extend my sincerest apologies that this episode is behind the scheduled time. Normally I like to post every other Sunday. However, in this case, this was a recorded episode with my husband, and our first episode had some technical difficulties, and so we had to re-record. And the only day that we could do that was when he had a day off from work. So hence the delay. But I always appreciate your listenership, viewership, if you're on YouTube. I just wanted to say overall, thank you for being here. And a quick, disclaimer is in this episode, we do talk about parenting, and my intention is never, ever, ever to make a parent feel shame or guilt about their parenting choices. And so I hope that as you listen to this and we start to get into some of the discussions around parenting, that you'll keep an open heart and an open mind and just know that my role here is not to judge you. It's just to maybe challenge some of the ways that you have thought about parenting in your life, in your experience. So again, I'm grateful for you all, those that are listening, and I hope you enjoy this episode.
All right.
Hello, and welcome to Mom's New Identity. I'm your host, Amber Ivana, and I'm here with my very first and special guest, as promised, my husband. And if you're watching this video on YouTube or if you're listening to this, I just want to say it is probably a little bit late, and I'm terribly sorry. We had some technical difficulties, and so we had to re-record. So I appreciate your patience, and we're going to get into this episode. So today we're just going to talk about parenting, mental health, as it relates to marriage and just being in a relationship in general. And yeah, I think that's about it. But before we get started, I want to introduce this guy here. He's my husband we're going on 8 years this year, right? Yeah, 8 years this year. And let's see, we have two beautiful kids, a little boy and a little girl. They're both under 3. He was born and raised in Las Vegas. Now I'm having a hard time thinking about. Was born and raised in Las Vegas. His family or his heritage is from Mexico, or what want to say? He was born to, you're like what, second generation Latino? Yeah. Because technically his mom was born here in Vegas too, even though she's also Mexican. Born to Mexican-born parents, and then his father was originally born in Mexico. Yeah. It's so weird, like I fluctuate between Mexican and Mexicano. So let's see. He has been, honestly, just a rock for me in so many ways. Like, we've been through crazy times, as you've probably heard in the last episode. If you didn't, go ahead and check that out. I talk about healing while in a relationship, but he's just like, he's been the person to show me like what unconditional love looks like in human form. Like, I mean, they say the first person to show that is obviously your parents, and it's different when it's coming from someone that's like not from your flesh and blood. You know what I mean? Like, of course, you would expect that from your parents, but you just don't expect that from someone. And so, um, yeah, he's my person. You're my person, honey. I love
You're
you.
my person.
He's the sweetest, kindest, funniest. I hope you guys will get to see his personality on this episode because he really is funny. He cracks me up all the time. Yeah.
We'll see. See how that goes.
But yeah, as of right now, he is actually the one, providing for our family, and he's the one working full time so that I can stay home and take care of our kids and take care of the household. Um, but yeah, he's a good man. He's a great husband. Just an overall amazing human being, loving father, caring father.
Keep going.
You really are. Oh, there goes that laugh again. But yeah, does that about cover it? Did I miss anything, honey?
Yeah, that's about it.
That's about it.
More than I could have said.
More than you could have said.
Mm.
Okay. Well, let's start by getting into what do we say, like when it comes to parenting and stuff, and what are what are some of the things that like beliefs or things like that we had before we had kids about how we would raise our kids.
Mm. Where do we begin? I don't know, just growing up with Hispanic parents and the way I grew up with my aunts and uncles and the way my cousins and everybody that I know growing up. It was always, if they misbehave, spank them and, whatever, put them in timeout. Um, just pretty much yelling at each other, yelling at the kid. And that's pretty much how I grew up. And I know when you and me talked about it, we talked about, oh, well, we have kids and this and that, we're, going to do this, we're going to do that, make sure we do this and that. But, once you have kids, at the beginning, it was hard not to, sometimes you do. And, our first kid with, with our daughter, we just, it was hard. It was hard. It just made you, anytime she misbehaved, you wanted to yell or like scream at her, or like, and
This is
sometimes,
like when she like after she turned one, like maybe 1.5.
mm-hmm,
Like when she's an infant, it's a different story. But
uh, no, when she would misbehave or do something, you're just like, oh, you would get frustrated, or no, I would get frustrated and want to yell and stuff like that. But I would try to hold it in. But I didn't want to be that parent or be that the way I grew up and being yelled at and pretty much like what was that? Uh,
belted, all kinds of like
oh, yeah, I got fucking spanked.
corporal punishment,
uh,
aka abuse. Like that's really what it is. Let's be real.
I
Like,
got spanked with the belt, with the whip, anything you can
mhm,
shine a shoe,
yeah.
in the cold shower. Yeah, there was a lot of stuff. It was mostly my dad, but you know, um, but yeah. After a while, you got you so used to getting spanked, you started laughing, and you couldn't stop laughing. I remember doing that with my brother a couple times, where we're just getting our ass whipped, and we're still laughing our asses off, even though we're getting whipped with the belt. Well, you get
That's
so used to
that.
you
That's
guys.
that like dark humor that people talk about. Like when you're so traumatized, you just like you make a joke about it, and people are like, people that aren't traumatized or weren't raised like that, they're like, "You fucking serious?" Like, they're like, "The
uh,
what?" Yeah.
there's always that one I always tell Amber about where I got, he smacked me so hard, or I don't know if he, I can't really remember if it was a close fist or a slap. Just made my nose bleed, and my mom got so mad at him that she yelled at him. But it's always one of those ones that I can remember that was just like, damn. I think pretty much I got abused when I was little, pretty much. But anyways, just bringing it back to the question was, just I knew I wanted to raise my kids differently. I know I didn't want to do that same thing where I yell at them. They're kids. They don't know what they're doing. they're little human beings that are trying to learn and trying to observe everything. They don't know, they're just exploring. And now that I'm trying to go through a healing journey with you and trying to get everything resolved, my traumas and everything I had in the past, and trying to break the past.
Yeah.
It's helped out a lot. It's just, I still got to get through it. Some days it's still hard. It's so ingrained in me that I just want to be like, stop,
Yeah.
or yell at them. And, I've done that a couple times, and it feels really bad afterwards because you can see it in their eyes like, what did I do? I don't know what I did. Instead of sitting down and be like, hey, this is what this is. Make sure you don't do it. It hurts, or like, this is what happens. Trying to explain to them. I know they're small and they're not going to really understand, but the more you explain to them, the more they'll catch on.
More than that, like kids like pick up on your energy. They pick up on like
Mhm.
your tone, your body language. Like they're more intuitive, I feel like, than people give credit for. Like it's like I feel that sometimes people see children as like these just like little totally inadequate or helpless beings that just like don't know how to think for themselves. So it's like you have to teach them, and like that's I don't say this intended to like make anybody feel bad if that's how you raise your children. What I can say though is that in just some of the things that I've learned in the last like I don't know year and a half, that those first 5 years and the way that you raise your children has a lasting impact on who they become as a person, their mental health, whether or not they become addicted, and their attachment style. So it's a lot more, I guess you could say, it's a lot more damaging, some of the things that we have been taught, a lot of us. And especially like if you are in the Latino community, like, spank your kids, yell at your kids, like they're supposed to respect authority and just all of those things. And I don't know, we can get into that a little bit more towards the end of this podcast. But I guess, well, I guess it all just, was tied
Yeah.
together. But
See where it goes.
yeah, just see where it goes and have a
You're on
conversation.
those
But
stairs all of a sudden, right? Bam, boom, boom.
I know, right? We started out like, kind of like light, and then it was like, boom, straight into the. But
Mm.
I think that maybe I want to do a different episode, like just really digging into this and like just talking about some of the things that I learned, because I feel like this stuff is important. But to
Mhm.
your point, yeah, when you've just been raised that like children are meant to respect authority and they need discipline and they need all of these things, like it's no wonder why with that type of like, I guess, punishment, like very strict corporal punishment, that you and I both, while I didn't necessarily like experience the extremes that you did, in my case, I was more witness to it from my mother. And, I don't, it was really hard because it's like, I don't ever want to like make her look like she's a bad person, but I think so many of us um, have experienced this, and I don't fault my mom for that. She just did what she thought was the right thing at the time. But I saw how she would treat my older sister, and I learned how to avoid that. I learned how to shut out any sort of emotion, any sort of rebellion, and I learned to just always comply. And that carried me through most of my life, and I was always rewarded for complying and being someone that doesn't ruffle feathers and being someone that doesn't cause chaos, or just basically just bending over backwards to ensure that authority figures or anyone around me was that their needs were met, because that's what hypervigilance is, right? So while I didn't necessarily experience it firsthand, it does have an impact on you. And like I'm grateful because my dad, on the other hand, never laid his hands on me, never raised his voice at me. He maybe had his highs and lows with his mental health, and that did make a lasting impact on me. And we have since worked through that. But, like, it's just, it's so crazy how we can go from just like before having kids, you have this idea of what's supposed to, like, how kids are supposed to be and how you're supposed to raise them. And then you look at these tiny beings and you just look in their eyes and you're like, I would never want to hurt you. Like, I can't even imagine. Like, it's just crazy. Because if that's like naturally ingrained in us, it makes me wonder, how did our parents just think that that was okay? Do they carry a lot of shame about it? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know, but it's kind of like what we were talking about earlier this morning, where it's I wouldn't say like I blame them for been doing what they did, or like, oh, they're bad parents or this or that,
Right.
or they just did what they knew how. They knew they had an example from their parents and their parents' parents, and it just kept going through. And a lot of people, they're learning this now. Back then, I thought it was just a lot of BS and this and that. And because I grew up Hispanic, and
Hmm.
anxiety and traumas and all this stuff was just weak-minded and stuff like that. But now going through it, I noticed, a lot of parents, maybe my dad and your mom, like, people that raised us, they all have anxiety, they all have traumas, they all have things that they went through, you know, um, traumas that they just held in so long that they're just let it out on their kids. And nowadays, it's like we're starting to learn about all this stuff because of social media, and they didn't have that back then.
Hmm.
All they had was their friends and family doing the same shit.
Yeah.
Oh, what do you do with your kid when they do this? Let's smack the shit out of them. They'll
Yeah.
fucking listen.
Yeah.
you know,
Right. Yeah.
they'll
Exactly.
listen, fucking discipline them, or they'll, I don't know, do whatever you need to do to get them to listen.
Yeah.
And it was like they didn't have the information that we do now. We can go on, we have all the science stuff backing all this stuff that we talk about,
Research. Yeah.
research, and we have, you can literally go on TikTok or Facebook, Instagram, whatever you want to go to, and get on groups, and they'll teach you, oh, I've done this with my kids and this and that. There's
Yeah.
communities out there now.
Yeah. Like gentle parenting
Yeah,
type
so
stuff.
like it's not like I hate. Oh my god, it's not like I want to be like I want to like, oh, they just didn't know what they know. They
They
didn't know
didn't know
what
what they
they didn't
didn't.
have the information,
Right.
and that's
Exactly.
what what you're trying to do with this podcast and what you're trying to do, and trying to make sure everybody is aware now. Like we have that information now, so it's I've noticed the difference with our daughter, and
Yeah.
but I see other kids her age that you can tell they're being punished.
Yeah.
You can tell they're scared to do things, or like they look at their parent and they're scared, or they do something, they look back like, oh damn, I'm about to get yelled at or something, because you can see it in their eyes. And with Gabriella, like, she's
With our
free.
daughter. Yeah.
You can tell she's fearless. She does what she wants, and if she does something out of line, we just talk to her about it, and she understands. I feel like the terrible twos that everybody talks about, like, oh, the terrible twos, wait till she gets really, yeah, like sometimes she loses her stuff and she gets mad, but we talk through it, and it's better than yelling at her. She doesn't know she has feelings.
Yeah.
She doesn't know.
I'm just getting emotional because it's just like, yeah.
And you can see it in her. You can see, like, even when we go to the playground, kids, like the parents, you see parents like, okay, we gotta go. You see the kids throwing tantrums, like, no, I don't want to go, blah, blah, and they start crying and
Yeah.
screaming. They're all like the same age as our daughter, but with Gabriella, we're like, hey, we got 5 minutes. Once 5 minutes are up, we gotta go.
Yeah.
And since we talk to her and we like express ourselves, we tell her, we explain stuff to her, and we don't spank her and things like that. We treat her as a little human being that's just growing.
Yeah.
And I feel like I can see that the difference between the two. and I can see like it's not terrible too. It's just what you pretty much, you know, have taught them since they were little.
Yeah.
If you yell at them and scream at them, and always when you're angry, what are they
Yeah.
gonna do when they're angry? They're gonna scream, yell, cry, do the same thing you do to them.
Yeah.
They just repeat everything we do to them. So, anyways, I don't even know why I started this, but it
No.
was
No.
pretty much, just saying like
No,
we don't
you're right.
blame our past parents,
Yeah.
or they just did the best they could with the
Yeah.
information they had,
And
and the
you,
information they had was family and friends,
right.
which all did the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. It
So
was normalized.
now, hopefully, now with the information coming out, hopefully things change, and little by little.
I think even now, even though the information's out there, I think people still just like, and please know that when we talk about these things, the intent here is not to try and like make people feel guilty. I think it's important though that like what you're saying, I 100% agree with you. I think you're spot on about children and how they pick up on everything that we do. Like they mimic us, right? Um, but I want to let you know, the listeners, that if your children are acting this way and you're having a hard time with them, the best thing that you can do to change however it is that you're parenting your kids, first be aware of the things that you want to change. And I think so many of us, because we have a tendency to people please, because a lot of us have a hard time finding our own voice and sticking up for ourselves and speaking our truth, I think so many parents, even now, will comply with the same parenting methods that they were that that they experienced, because they just they don't feel like, I guess, comfortable enough to like speak up and change behavior. I mean, I could be way off. There's a lot of people, believe it or not, out there still that think that's the best way to parent your children, like hitting them and disciplining them. And quite honestly, I feel really sad for their children if they know that there is a better way that's going to yield better results and not harm their mental health in the long run or have lasting negative impacts. Like the parents that really don't know, I don't fault you, but the parents that do know there's alternative methods and just choose not to listen and choose to continue what they're doing because they don't care to listen to experts, they don't care to look at the research, like the I can't help those people. And I feel really sad for your kids. And I can tell you right now that those parents that are deliberately choosing to continue those parenting methods despite other options that don't involve hitting your children, like your children could end up one day not wanting to have a relationship with you. I'm just going to tell you that right now. Like, because if you aren't willing enough to accept that maybe what you were doing thus far was wrong and change course and do better, you may never become emotionally mature enough to admit when you're wrong. And that's going to be really hard for your kids as adult children, like when they grow up, right? I don't know. It's
much deeper than just, I don't know. It's not, how do I say this? You're not going to be able to change anything until you actually work on yourself.
exactly.
You can try to read as many books and, I don't know, how to discipline your children, YouTube videos, podcasts, whatever you want to do. But until you do the work on yourself, nothing's going to change.
Ding, ding, ding.
Nothing at all. Because all that's going to happen is, you're going to read that book and be like, oh, I'll try this next time. Something wrong happens, pressure gets to you, and you had a long day, and it all comes back to you. On
Emotional regulation.
how to regulate your emotions, how to,
Yeah.
remember why you're doing this. And if you really don't care about working on yourselves, you're not going to give a shit about your kids. So, It's the truth. You got to work on yourself, and if you don't, then it all starts with you.
Yeah.
And the kids they'll see that.
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah. Just wanted to say that.
No, that was good. Preach, honey, preach. Someone's gonna get lucky tonight. Oh, I know I'm distracted.
Yeah.
Yeah, that I guess brings me into like our next thing, about like working on yourself, and I can definitely say from experience too that like emotional regulation for yourself is the number one thing or skill that you need in order to be able to parent your children better. Like exactly like he was saying, right? But the hard thing is a lot of us don't even know where to start when it comes to emotional regulation, right? Like we don't even know how do we emotionally regulate ourselves? What does that even mean? Like, and what I can say, a couple things. One is like mindfulness and meditation. And like I know so many people are like, oh, meditation, blah, blah, blah. It seems like this like really complicated thing. And I promise, once you get the hang of it and once you start to build like a regular practice of it, it makes a humongous difference. I can't tell you how many times in the day my kids, and here's the thing is I have ADHD. So, and this was actually, I was diagnosed like just in the last like year. And so sometimes things, I just get overstimulated very quickly. And even with that, I am able to recognize and become aware of, okay, all of this is going on and it's getting me escalated and I need to take it down a notch. I need to like release the pressure and I need to breathe. Like take a deep breath, relax. And I don't know that that would be like an almost automated skill had I not practiced meditation for the, I don't know, entirety of my second pregnancy and then even after that. So on that note, if you want to know a little bit about getting started in meditation, I have a YouTube video on my channel. If you're watching this on YouTube, I'll link it in here in the, I don't know where it goes in the video. I have to edit it on YouTube. So, or I'll put it in the description below. I'll even put it in the show notes if you're just listening to this. You can go watch that. But yeah, emotional regulation is huge. Like, and just like working through your trauma and like what triggers you. And it's a lot of work. It's not easy. And the more traumatized you are, the more likely you have started to dissociate. And sometimes your brain doesn't even remember things that need to heal because it doesn't feel safe enough to do that. And I mean, I know, like, I mean, you don't have to go into detail, right? As far as, things that you've experienced, but I know that sometimes when I've asked you about certain times in your childhood, you're like, I can't remember. And that's one of the hard parts about healing too, is that like your brain has this built-in defense mechanism to protect you and it shuts off memories until one day it just boom comes flooding in and you're like, what am I supposed to do with this? Like, and it's hard. It really is. But I mean, I don't know, what are your like when I say that, like what are your thoughts on that? Like just
Yeah. Like another way to start too is, like, if you don't feel like meditating or anything like that, always the way I started, just find a therapist. I know it's sometimes you don't want to do that, you don't want to talk to somebody or
yeah.
but it's the first step sometimes, just finding a therapist. It is hard to find a therapist sometimes or try to find the right one. But once you find the right one, you can talk through things. Um, because sometimes you don't want to talk to your family members, your wife, or something about. You don't want to recall that stuff with somebody you know. So sometimes you just want to talk to a stranger and just they don't know you too much, I guess.
Yeah.
And yeah, sometimes just trying to get started with the therapist, and from there, you can try other things. Therapists will recommend stuff for you. And it is hard at first. It's not easy trying to recall your past and trying to go through it and try to talk to someone that doesn't really know you on stuff, but
Yeah.
it's the first step. Just pretty much bringing it all out, telling something, talking through it. Because sometimes people hold it in so long that they've never talked through it to somebody, and sometimes just talking through it or writing it down helps a lot.
Yeah. 100%.
So yeah, and then from there, therapists will recommend different things like a journal if you want to write stuff down, or meditation, or depending on if you have anxiety or if you have different things, they'll recommend stuff for you.
Yeah.
So I know it's hard because some,
Yeah. It's all right.
but
I say like a lot, so like
so I know it's you don't have to tell nobody that you go to therapy.
Yeah, yeah, that can be 100% private,
Private, just do it. I know sometimes being Latino or therapy isn't
or just a
something
person
that
of color.
nobody
Yeah.
it's nobody really talks about therapy. Or I
Mhm.
know now it's becoming more accepted, I guess, but like before it was like you talk about therapists, you don't need that shit.
Yeah.
You'll be fine.
Yeah.
But if you want to just do it on your own and just not tell anybody, do it.
Mm.
Go from there.
Yeah.
When people see the difference, they'll see the change, and they'll be like, "Oh, what have you done?" If you want to tell them, you can tell them. If not, then just just did a couple changes.
Yeah.
But that does help. It does help with your mental state. It helps with anxiety. It helps with a lot of stuff, and I'm still working through it. Only because of Amber, that's the only reason I'm going through it. Yeah. If it wasn't for her, and then seeing her change, her growth, and her pretty much her mood and everything changing from when we first started dating till now, she's improved so much,
Yeah.
and just seeing that inspired me. So made me want to go through it all and check it out. And it's still hard. I'm still going through it.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to find ways to cope. Sometimes I'm still trying to find different things to do, but little by little.
So proud of you, honey.
Thank you.
Love
I love you
you.
too. Yeah.
Yeah. That he brought up a really, really good point is that you cannot force your partner, your spouse, whatever, to do the work on themselves if you're not actively doing the work on yourself. Right? Like you have to practice what you preach. And I said that in my last episode, but I cannot emphasize it more. And what he just said is like proof of that, right? Like that's just a prime example of how sometimes the best way to encourage somebody else to change is to be the change. You know, you can't force an ultimatum. It's not going to work. I think I tried that too. Like I tried to strong arm you. And say, you need to go to therapy. Like you need to deal with your shit. Like, um, and then when I started to work on myself, it was like I started to see my own toxic behaviors and had a lot of just, you know, I don't know if I would say revelations or just like realizing, oh man, that was like pretty toxic. The way that I would act, like the things that I did, and I had a lot of repressed anger, and yeah. So, what I wanted you to touch on this again because I know last time we tried to record this, but um, what advice would you give to maybe men specifically, like to start to take ownership of their own healing and their mental health?
I don't just talk to each other. Sometimes, you don't want to talk to your wife, or you don't want to talk to your spouse, or significant other, or girlfriend, and you're hurting. I know a lot of people, a lot of men that are hurting, and they're going through stuff, and they're going through it in silence. And sometimes it takes for them to get drunk with their friend or their cousin or something to start expressing themselves, and or else they try to hold it in by alcohol, or they try to heal their or try to numb the pain by doing drugs or whatever it is. And sometimes all you gotta need to do is just talk to the other person. Talk to your friend. You're always with them. If you're with them playing a video game, or you're at the bar with them drinking, or you're just at the house barbecuing with them, just talk to them, seeing how they're doing, check up on them. That's all you need. Sometimes all you need is just someone to talk to. Sometimes just, hey, how you doing? How are you really doing?
No bullshit. Like, no
Mhm.
cap. No cap. How are you really doing? Like,
Well, if that's your therapy, and that's you don't want to go to therapy, just talk to someone that's close to you. Talk to your friends, your cousin, whatever, whoever it is that you talk to. Just realize if you don't want it to be your girlfriend, your spouse, significant other, or someone, or if you don't have, a girlfriend, anything like that, you just whoever you talk to, just you can either start the conversation, or well, I guess you're gonna have to start the conversation.
right.
But
What would you say, like, if it's not well received? You know what I mean? Like, if somebody like opens up and they're just like, oh, that's some like, that's some stop being a little bitch, or some stuff like that. Like, what would you say, like, in that scenario? Because I feel like a lot of men, like, because they're uncomfortable with their emotions and being vulnerable, that they just like shut it down, even if it's coming from somebody that they trust.
just if they're being offensive, or not offensive, but like guarded, or saying, "Oh, stop being a bitch," I don't want to talk about this. It's like, no, you're being a bitch right now because you don't want to talk about it. You'd rather close yourself down and not talk about it than talk to someone about it. You need to talk about it. That's,
They end up taking it out on the people around them.
like, I don't know, like, I don't know, like if they shut you down, or if you can tell like something's going on with them, just keep poking at it, and eventually it'll come out. Show them that you care, that you love them, that you're there for them. Tell them it's time to open up.
Yeah.
Don't wait till it's too late.
Yeah.
A lot of people wait till it's too late, and
And they wish they would have said something,
mm-hmm.
but then it's too late because they're gone.
Because they're either gone, they're having addiction, something happens, or all you have to do is just tell them, "Hey, how you doing?"
Yeah. It's hard too because I think, like, I mean, we can cut this out if you don't feel comfortable, but I just remember when I was pregnant and with our daughter, my first pregnancy, just a couple weeks before she was born, you lost one of your cousins, right? That passed away in a motorcycle accident. And I remember you just being like so, like, obviously distraught by it, right? It was a sudden loss. It was not expected. He was so young. Um, Rest in peace, Stevie. But I just remember you talking to your dad, and he told you, you need to be strong because your wife's pregnant. You need to be strong. And, like, I get the sentiment because, you know, pregnant women, they absorb the environment around them. But it's that type of advice and that same belief, like, you can't show emotion. Like, you literally lost a loved one. And you were being told by someone, I guess, if we want to keep it anonymous, to just be strong and hold in your emotions. And, like, that messaging is toxic. Like, I don't want to just say toxic because that's such an overused term. It's damaging to a lot of men's health because men are always thinking that, like, they need to be strong. I gotta be strong. I gotta be strong. Like, even now, like, you have a tendency to do that, right? Like, you just suppress and suppress and suppress, and you don't tell me what's going on until, like, finally crack it out of you somehow. And like, and then when you share, it's like you're lighter. It's like this whole thing that you've been carrying for so long that you've not felt comfortable enough to express. It's like a weight's been lifted off your shoulders. Like I noticed even just in our conversation last night. Like I feel part of the difference today was that you just like felt a lot lighter because you weren't carrying that anymore by yourself. You know? And I think sometimes maybe some men underestimate what their partner, their wife, significant other, whatever, is actually able to carry. But I think at the same time, if they know that she will react in a way that's like not, I guess, emotionally mature, if I can put it that way. I don't want to say that like most women are emotionally immature, but I can say like for myself, when you would tell me things that you were shouldering, way before I started doing the work, I would get really emotional and I would get anxious and I would like cry and be like, oh my God, like why? And so then it made him feel worse because he's like, oh fuck, I just like dumped all this onto her and now she's more worried. Now she's more stressed. Whereas now, that's not always a response that you get. Right? Like it depends on what you're telling me. Like maybe sometimes I will get emotional, but I just like, you gotta do the work. You gotta do the work.
Yeah.
As parents, as couples, like,
Yeah.
so important. But was
Yeah.
there? I'm trying to think if there was something else like that we missed or that we didn't cover that we're planning on covering. I think we pretty much did, right? Like
Yeah.
parenting,
Do the work.
do the work.
Do the work.
Yeah. Any last thoughts?
I think.
Do 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 do. No, I'm just kidding. I think just the last thing too that I want to bring home is like, well, not bring home, but this may or may not be like relative to anything that we talked about, but specifically when it comes to like maintaining your sanity and your mental health after having kids in a relationship, I think that one piece of advice that I just want to share is how important it is to, like, people always emphasize the need to like date your spouse, like, oh, make sure you take time with each other, because having kids is hard. I think to add on to that, you both need to take time by yourself individually to like do the things that you enjoy, do some self-care, maybe even some self-reflection, like take some time alone to just like sit and be with your thoughts. And sometimes that's scary to people, but I can't tell you how much that has like made such a difference in our relationship and our marriage, being able to take time to ourselves by ourselves individually for at least an hour and a half to 2 hours every single week. Like that is like, if there's one thing that does not move on our calendar, it's that. It makes such a huge difference in like just the tension and the emotional regulation, like we were talking about earlier too, so
Yeah. It's at first it's hard.
yeah.
At first you're like, what do I do? Got a couple hours to myself by myself. Like you just go out there. You're like, first time I took we call it me time.
Yeah, it's me down.
The first time I did my me time, I just remember just going to a coffee shop and yeah, I'm gonna do this and that, do a whole list and write down my ideas and like I had this whole thing planned out. And literally I got there, sat down, watched YouTube videos, got bored, went on TikTok, had some coffee, didn't do anything I was gonna do. Like
It's just a mental break.
it's just some. It doesn't even have to be like planned out or like, oh, I need to have 2 hours to myself. I need to do this to catch up on this. I need to do this.
Yeah.
Just go for a drive sometimes.
Yeah.
Shit, sometimes I go for a drive. After I go sit down by myself and go eat. It's
Yeah.
relaxing. Or just listen to music. I try to be as less stressed as I can be.
Mm.
Just relax. Sometimes I go to the range. Sometimes I go walk around the store by myself. Like,
Yeah.
just have fun. Just have fun with it. Don't stress about it.
Yeah.
When you get out in the car and you get in the car, your hands and feet will guide you to where you want to go.
Yeah. I think also too, like, this requires a significant amount of trust in the relationship because, like, it's pretty much like each of us is just like, oh, go take your time. Like, we don't really bother each other unless it's in like really an emergency or maybe we have a quick question. Sometimes we text each other just because like we want to talk about something or maybe something's like.
And I'll text them like at the Sanchez house. I'll be home in 11.
No, we joke about that, but like we do definitely trust each other a lot. So that's going to be really, really hard if there's not trust. If trust has been broken before, right? Like, so that's something I would say also to take with a grain of salt. That advice, I should say.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
People that you
Take
don't trust
advantage.
leaving for 2 hours and don't
Unaccounted
know
for,
yeah.
yeah. Some
It's
people
like,
won't
I
do the
can't.
most integrous thing. You know what I'm saying?
It's like I can't go to the strip club. I work there, so.
Yeah. Anyways.
So, but I don't know. Just if you can do it, and you can have someone that you can trust, or your significant other, spouse, can trust each other.
Yeah.
Do it. Have fun. Then also do those nights, your date nights.
Yeah.
Day dates. Wherever you can squeeze it in. It doesn't have to be at night. It can be during the day. Just have fun with each other. Life is short.
All right.
And then, but yeah, we're about to have some fun after this.
Oh my gosh. Okay. All right. Well, I hope you all enjoyed this episode. We kind of went on a bunch of different tangents and it didn't go exactly as planned, but I think we definitely shared some really important things. And just like.
There's other things that we talked about, I think. But.
Honestly, I think we missed some things, but I will find out once I finish editing. And yeah, so if you like this episode or if you enjoy this podcast, be sure to drop a rating. 5 stars only, nothing less. No, just kidding. Be honest. Be honest, please.
Yeah.
I appreciate the honesty. But yeah, just go ahead and follow the show. Click that little plus button. Subscribe on YouTube. I post bi-weekly. At some point, hopefully in the near future, I will be able to do weekly episodes. But until that time comes and my capacity increases, it will continue to be bi-weekly. So I appreciate your patience, your viewership, your listening to this podcast. And
I'll see you guys whenever I see you guys next.
yeah, well, I'll probably have them back on the episode, on the show sometime later on. Maybe want to have like a whole studio and stuff. That'd be nice. But
come back, check in.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for listening, and let's continue to grow and heal together as a community.
Do it.
Let's do it. Mom's New Identity podcast is written, directed, and produced by your host, Amber Ivana. Intro music, Madre Creator, is written and performed by Hari Rojas Music.